Thank you, committee members. It is 4:54, which is 10 minutes past the last vote. So I will, the clerk has advised me. We obviously have a quorum. Everybody's tested. So I will call the meeting to order and advise that we've got the resources to go to 6:54. Full 2 hours. So I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 94. Oh, sorry. Yeah, what happened?
On nous dit que les services d'interprétation sont interrompus, fait que je demande qu'on attende que ce soit réglé avant de commencer, Monsieur le Président.
Okay. Yeah. Hello, hello. Hold a second. Hello, hello.
It's not your thing.
I will suspend for a few moments while we're correcting the interpretation. committee members, I call the meeting to order. And my apologies. It's a reminder, please, if do not have your phones on vibrate near the earpiece when you're speaking, because it obviously will hurt the interpreters. So again, welcome to meeting number 94 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills, Social Development and Status of Persons with Disabilities. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on June the 13th, the committee is continuing its study on intergenerational volunteerism. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Witnesses are appearing virtually online as well as here in the room. You have the option to speak in the official language of your choice. In the room, interpretation is available through your earpiece. Virtually, click on the globe icon on the bottom of your surface and choose the language of your choice. If there is an interruption in interpretation, please get my attention. We'll suspend while it's being corrected. I would like to again remind members to please keep their telephones and their earpiece away from the mic for the protection of the hearing of our interpreters. I remind all members to address their comments through the chair, using the raised hand function or your hand in the room. Before we go to witness, I wish to confirm, Madame Chabot, I wish to confirm with members a deadline to provide the clerk their list of witnesses for the study on Bill C-319, an act to amend the Old Age Security Act. Is there agreement that the deadline to submit witness be on Wednesday, December the 13th? Wednesday, December the 13th for witnesses on Bill C-319, which will resume in the new year. Seeing no disagreement, we'll set that deadline. So witnesses in the room this evening, now appearing virtually pour Le Petit Peuple.
Representing Le Petit Peuple, Jeanne Campeau.
Conference, Ms. Campono, welcome. And Volunteer Ottawa, Christine Troutmansdorf, Executive Director.
Mr. Chair, just before we begin the witnesses, I'm wondering if I can just bring up a very quick housekeeping item, if I may. So this committee has requested documents that haven't been sent to it yet. And I'm sure all committee members will agree that that's not acceptable, and so that we should follow up with that organization to get the documents. And specifically, this was from the CMHC, going back to February, where documents were requested specifically on board meeting minutes. They had written the committee in April, I believe around April 17th, and then it was brought up again when the CEO was here recently, and we still haven't received the documents. So I'm just wondering if we can get consensus for the committee to write to CMHC to get the documents sent here that haven't been sent by Monday at 9 o'clock. They've had 10 months, and then that way we can have the documents before we rise for this session. So I'm hoping we can just have a quick consensus on that.
Thank you, Ms. Gray.
Sure. Yeah, I just I agree with MP Gray for sure, but I just want to be clear. I'm trying to think back to then. Did they say for sure they would submit them, or they would check? If was it cut and dry?
If I may, Mr. Chair, through you, they had written the committee on April 17th because there were other committee members that had requested other documents from CMHC, and they did forward some of them. And in that written correspondence to the committee on April 17th, they said that those documents would be coming, but we still haven't received them.
Mr. Fergus-Caddis?
Yeah, I don't doubt what our colleague has said, but just so we're on the same page, I wonder if we could have whether it's blues brought up from the meeting where that commitment was made, or just wording so we know exactly what CMHC committed to before agreeing to what Ms. Gray has put forward. I think that's reasonable for us to take a look at.
Well, I don't have access to the blues with me, but if that's what you request, then we don't have consensus to proceed as Ms. Gray outlined. Mr. Faragas-Gatos?
Just in a spirit of goodwill, I mean, this is a meeting in the, it's a meeting that's going to be lengthy. So if Ms. Gray is able to pull that up, then she can raise it again. I'm not saying that we won't agree. I just wanted to see exactly what had been committed to. So I leave that to the member who's raising the matter to take that up.
Could we then just...
Mr. Chair, can I just respond? So the clerk should be able to provide, because they had written to the committee on April 17th saying that those documents were forthcoming. So we actually have a written documentation from CMHC that would have come to the committee when they brought forth other documents. So we actually have it in writing from them.
Okay.
And I'm sure the clerk can pull that up.
Thank you.
So perhaps we can agree that if that's what, maybe just to move this along, we can agree that if that's what CMHC had said in the written documentation, that therefore we can move forward with that. If maybe we can just agree to that without, having a lengthy process here.
Mr. Faragas-Gatos?
Just very quickly, if the clerk can send that, he has it at his disposal, I understand.
At his disposal, we'll attempt to get the document.
I think we can deal with it in this meeting.
Yeah, we will deal with it in this meeting. Mr. Coteau?
I was going to say, why don't we just agree to action whatever we agreed to? Right? If we agreed to it, we agreed to it. Yeah.
Ms. Cirillo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if that's going, we also get the information about CMHC contacts? What came back to me was contacts from Infrastructure Canada, and what was asked for was in contacts from CMHC. And also, Mr. Chair, if you wouldn't just mind clarifying, we only have about an hour, so I just want to make sure that we get at least one round of discussion in equitably and fairly. So if you could just clarify how we're going to proceed today, that'd be awesome.
I just want to advise the committee, we do have resources to go beyond 7 o'clock. If the committees wish, we can proceed till 7:30. Ms. Cirillo?
Mr. Chair, I'm not going to have staff resources past 6:30, so to go all the way to 7 is too much, and there's also debates in the House tonight planned.
We will deal with that at the appropriate time. I want to begin. We have a commitment before the meeting adjourns to revisit Ms. Gray's question she put before, and I will attempt to get the information. With that, I would ask for the opening statement with Ms. Campo. Ms. Campo, you have 5 minutes, please.
Bonsoir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm speaking to you in my capacity as Executive Director of Le Petit Peuple. We are a community organization dedicated to intergenerational assistance, an initiative that transcends age barriers to create meaningful ties between young and old in all of society. Intergenerational assistance, particularly through volunteering, offers multiple benefits for both the young and the old. Let me share with you a few thoughts on the positive impact that these interactions can have on our community, taking into account the profound isolation that seniors and young people have experienced in recent years, and stressing the crucial importance of building a society that shows respect for our seniors. 2 years ago, Petit Peuple obtained funding from the Quebec Amis des Aînés program. The program was conceived with a view to setting up a permanent structure that will enable daily intergenerational activities within our organization. These activities include community kitchens, film debates, craft workshops, and coffee clubs. Although words can't really express the real positive impact this project has had, I would like to share with you a testimony we gathered during the project's implementation. Mrs. Pottinger, an 81-year-old woman who has lived alone for many years with heart problems and diabetes, is an eloquent example of the concrete impact of our initiative. One day, she shared her knitting creations with us, stating that it was her favorite activity. We invited her to come and teach at our organization. More than 20 young people have learned the art of knitting thanks to her teaching. Ms. Pottinger went on to say that Le Petit Peuple had in a way saved her life, pointing out that these classes had given her a reason to go on living. Intergenerational volunteering is emerging as a response to the growing challenge of an aging population and is shaping up as an innovative and effective solution with social, economic, and health benefits. The aging population brings with it new challenges, including growing needs for care and support. Intergenerational volunteering offers flexibility and adaptability to meet these emerging needs in an inclusive, community-centered way. Intergenerational interactions provide crucial emotional support. Relationships established through volunteering provide a support network that can help seniors cope with the emotional challenges of aging, contributing to their mental well-being. However, I would like to raise a reality that our organization faces: limited access to long-term funding due to the lack of awareness of intergenerational volunteering and the inherent complexity of targeting two distinct groups. There's no denying that intergenerational volunteering remains to some extent little known. This lack of understanding often translates into challenges in obtaining long-term funding. The specificity of our initiative, which includes two distinct categories of target clients, young people and seniors, can sometimes make it complex to demonstrate the real impacts on the community. To advance these intergenerational mutual assistance initiatives, it would be beneficial to examine specific funding mechanisms, recognizing the unique nature of these programs. Dedicated grants or financial support programs for volunteer-based organizations could contribute to ensure the continuity and expansion of these crucial initiatives. By promoting awareness of intergenerational volunteering and facilitating access to long-term financial resources, the government can play a crucial role in promoting the meaningful relationships between young people and seniors. In conclusion, I would like you to consider these realities as part of our deliberations, your deliberations on promoting intergenerational volunteering. It's essential to explore innovative solutions to financial challenges, ensuring that these initiatives can continue to flourish and enrich the social fabric of our society. Thank you for your attention.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell.
Grootmansdorf.
Merci,
5
Monsieur
minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Chair. Good evening.
opportunity to appear today. Et merci de mettre en lumière la valeur et l'importance
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to highlight the importance of volunteering.
of Volunteer Ottawa, Bénévole Ottawa. Volunteer Ottawa is a charitable organization that's been promoting, supporting, and celebrating volunteering for over 65 years. Through a membership model, we help hundreds of local charities recruit volunteers and provide their staff with a wide range of training workshops and communication resources. We provide the local business sector with community engagement services, primarily through group volunteering. And most of all, we talk to people. We talk to them about the benefits and rewards that come from sharing their time and talent with others. We host recruitment fairs, recognition events, and we send guest speakers out into the community. We're all about making Ottawa a happier, healthier, and more inclusive place to live. Volunteer Ottawa is one of about 150 volunteer centres working in communities throughout Canada. I'm sure that many of you cross paths with my amazing colleagues who are running volunteer centres that serve your ridings. The committee's asked for recommendations on ways the federal government can provide and encourage intergenerational volunteerism between seniors and youth. We're currently running 2 projects, one supporting youth leadership in volunteering, and the other aimed at re-engaging older adult volunteers. Both projects embed intergenerational opportunities for all the reasons described by the witnesses that appeared earlier this week. So my recommendations are going to focus on volunteering more generally from the perspective of a local volunteer centre. My first recommendation is for the development of a national action strategy on volunteering to unleash the full economic and social potential of Canada's volunteers. Volunteer centres tend to focus on the positive social benefits of volunteering, but there are very real economic benefits as well. In 2018, the Conference Board estimated the contribution of Canada's volunteers at $65 billion per year. That seems like a huge number, but when you consider that well over half the charities in Canada have no paid staff, that they're entirely reliant on volunteers, it starts to sink in. In a city the size of Ottawa, that's the equivalent of $1.5 billion in revenue for community services and programs. We've lost a lot of that capacity in the past few years. To recapture it and increase it, we need to think about joining forces under the umbrella of a national strategy that will strengthen the infrastructure that supports volunteering. Volunteer centres are a crucial part of that infrastructure. I'm a huge believer in the power of local. Local knowledge, local relationships, local networks, and community ecosystems. And that's what volunteer centres bring to the table. What we don't have are data, research capacity, policy frameworks, and shareable, scalable resources to support our work. My second recommendation is a shameless pitch that the strategy find a way to create stable funding mechanisms for volunteer centres and for volunteer management capacity in charities and nonprofits. Volunteer centres are all small but mighty organizations with a big reach and the ability to make a big difference. To give you an idea, Volunteer Ottawa serves a population of about 1 million people with 4 full-time and 2 part-time staff. We'll finish 2023 with about $570,000 in revenue. We've generated approximately $200,000 of that from membership fees, sales, and fundraising, and the rest comes from project-based grants. In 2023, we've accessed 12 grants from 11 different funders. We received no core funding from any level of government. Trevor Moss from the Central Okanagan Food Bank spoke about the time that grant writing takes away from delivering on mission and the uncertainty it means for operations and long-term planning. Virtually every volunteer centre would say the same thing, as would most of the local charities we work with here in Ottawa. My final recommendation is to you as individual members of Parliament, and it comes with no price tag at all. You are all high-profile leaders in your communities with thousands of connections to older adults, young people, newcomers, and so many other potential volunteers. You probably speak with staff from every single charity and nonprofit in your riding at least a couple of times a year. Make volunteering part of what you talk about. Speak about your own volunteer work, encourage people to get involved, and recognize and thank the volunteers you meet at local events. Promoting volunteerism is a ground game, not unlike political campaigning. And as one of the earlier witnesses said, it all starts with personal relationships, with being invited to help, with being told your time and talent are needed and appreciated. You are all in an excellent position to deliver those messages, and I encourage you to speak with your local volunteer centre about how you can use your voice, your website, your newsletters, and your presence to promote and encourage volunteerism. Thank you again for this wonderful opportunity. Merci beaucoup.
Trout-Mansdorf. We will begin with 6 minutes with Ms. Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much to our to the witnesses here to talk about volunteerism. I'm going to start, if I can, with Ms. Trout-Mansdorf. How's that? Did I do it? Okay. Thank you for what you've brought to the table. What we've heard actually in testimony so far on this is the impact of the cost of living, in particular seniors, right? Because they are often the people that we lean on the most to be the backbone of volunteerism. I know in my community, as you said, local is everything. But what we've seen is that seniors, and this has been documented repeatedly in the news as well, which I referred to in another committee, they're being forced back to work. They don't have that extra income. They don't have that, and consequently that extra time, or they're stepping up and they're helping for childcare for their children, for their grandchildren. They're paying more in heat. They're paying more in hydro. They're paying more in groceries. And some of them don't even have the money for the fuel to drive. So for my community care, an amazing volunteer organization that helps. Have you seen the cost of living be a direct result of being able to recruit and retain volunteers, especially seniors?
Yeah, I think there's no one who doesn't recognize that the cost of living impacts all aspects of our lives. I think, a couple of the ways that we've really seen and felt that in the work that we're doing is the related impact on the labor market. We have had lower unemployment than we've seen in a long time. And that has made for charities, nonprofits, including volunteer centres, a lot of challenges recruiting people at the salaries that we can afford to pay. And that's difficult, especially in a labor market like the one here in Ottawa, where we're competing with a lot of federal government employers, with post-secondaries. So that's one of the areas where we've certainly seen that. The members that we work with, the not-for-profits, are very conscious of some of the factors that impact, especially seniors and their ability to volunteer. And so they're offering, transportation subsidies, making sure that parking is available, making sure that someone has a meal when they come in to volunteer. But those are a couple of the things that we're recognizing as part of the reality today.
So with those subsidies, who's covering those costs? Because that seems to be sort of the rabbit hole that digs us further into this cost of living crisis.
So the impact of cost of services and providing that kind of environment to work in affects every aspect of our operations.
Mm-hmm. It's certainly a true statement, right? When the economy doesn't work, everything else starts to fall apart. If I could turn my attention to Ms. Campeau, thank you for your testimony. Sorry, I can't speak in French. I'm working on that. Désolé. I'm very interested in your testimony, because I think if we can get more young people to recognize and get involved and be volunteers, I think we have a better society. But I know, being a mom of teenagers myself, especially a university student who is so stressed about money, she making money to pay for housing, etc. I'm curious if you've seen that translate to the younger generation of the volunteers that you work with. I know you said teenagers, but I'm just wondering if the cost of living is impacting them as well.
Yes. Families are generally all affected by this situation. But could you please clarify your question? Are you asking whether the economic impact also has an impact on young people? Was that your question?
Yes. So what I was asking in particular was if it's affecting young people's decision to volunteer. If they're distracted with maybe trying to find a part-time job, they just don't have that extra time, or if it's impacting their decision to volunteer, the cost of living.
Oui, bien sûr. Et
Yes, of course. For some years now, our organization also offers internships abroad. For some years now, this requires great involvement in terms of time. Young people are beginning to work sooner. So yes, we do see the impact this has when it comes to recruiting volunteers. And we work a lot with schools. Talking about Quebec, there are many schools that require certain number of hours of volunteering.
Sure, 1 minute. I guess what I would ask for you also is, we've seen sort of an impact on young children. Again, I just speaking from my own experience as a mom, I feel like kids are less socialized. They're less comfortable being social. I mean, they don't even pick up the phone. They don't do the old school door knocking when you were in grade. You had to go sell door to door, the Christmas fundraiser or whatever. Do you find that is translating? Do you see that change in recruiting young people to do face-to-face volunteerism? Do you find them more drawn to stuff where they wouldn't have to have personal interaction in recruiting them?
Définitivement.
Certainly. I could give you an example. I like to establish a link with the seniors, because very often we have young people who visit residencies for seniors, and sometimes they are not at ease. Organization promotes that relationship between the young people and the seniors, and it's something we are saying. I'm also thinking that with the isolation that the young people experienced during COVID, we are seeing an impact with relationships. It's more difficult to approach others to develop relationships.
Merci, Madame Ferrari.
Thank you, Ms. Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank the witnesses, particularly for their patience until we got through our technology challenges. I'm interested in finding out what's working for your organizations. So I'll start with Volunteer Ottawa, and I'd like you to speak a little more about how your organization recruits and what type of retaining programs that you have.
Thank you very much. Welcome question. I mentioned two of the projects that we're working on right now, one to attract youth and the other is to recruit seniors. And in both cases, we're talking to people who can tell us what it is about volunteering that is appealing to them and what are the barriers to their volunteering. And then to help us design a campaign that is going to speak to those things. The other important thing, I think, and that's for seniors and for youth and for anyone else, is that invitation to volunteer be extended by someone that they can relate to. And so our Youth Volunteer Advocates Project is giving youth all sort of the leadership and communication and presentation skills, interaction skills to go out and speak with their peers in all corners of the community and talk to them about what volunteering is all about and share with them their ideas about opportunities. The other side of that is talking to the organizations who use volunteers about how to make a volunteer experience valuable and attractive to today's volunteers, whether that's old people or young people. And in some cases, they're adapting volunteering to be virtual, to do more things online or remotely. But it's the best thing to do is to ask people what they need, what they expect, what kind of supports they're going to need, whether it's a bus ticket or some recognition, and then make sure that the volunteering adapts accordingly.
Okay, Ms. Campo, your thoughts?
Oui, j'irais un peu dans le même sens.
I'll go in the same vein. Regarding recruitment, it's still difficult. But I think that young people usually come in through their teachers in school. They are doing the hours that they are obligated to do, depending on their program. They remain within their organization. They create links, they engage in important activities. We offer lots of activities. Sometimes, just by offering a meal, it changes everything for the volunteers. Sometimes we also offer transportation, which encourages them to participate in our activities. Each volunteer has unique needs, and it's on a case-by-case basis, so we need to communicate with them. Sometimes they're looking for something bigger than just volunteering.
Very specific, different groups, seniors and youth, and each of them have different things that would engage them. And so how do you cross that bridge between the two? And are there any trends that you're seeing between the two groups that are so significantly different that create the challenge in making that connection? And how should we approach that? I'll start with you, Christine.
A couple of examples might just illustrate. There's a group here in Ottawa called the Ottawa Network for Education that provides a lot of tutoring and support to students in school. And of course, a lot of seniors are doing that. A lot of that is done virtually now, and it's done through a tablet or through a computer. And so it's sort of crossing that digital divide. Sometimes the older people need a little bit of training or assistance in getting the hang of using Zoom or video meetings, but it works out really well. And so I think that the solutions are there to be found, and very often it's the people involved who can come and bring the solutions.
Ms. Campo, your thoughts on that? How do you bridge the different perspectives from each of those groups?
Oui.
Yes, absolutely. I would say that we can get strengths and address needs for each group. The other witness talked about difficulties that elders might face when it comes to using technology, but what we've seen is that our young people are very quick and skilled with their screens and technology. So there was a strength on one side, a need on the other side, and activities were created with that in mind. Same for cooking skills. We often have women, but older women who love cooking, and they were able to teach these skills to our young people who have sometimes lost these culinary skills, and that's how we work. We're not afraid of creating these relationships. Of course, there needs to be some people in charge, but yeah, that's how we work.
One other quick question. I'd heard that there were some things that you don't have, particularly from Christine. Started off with data, research, etc. So my question is what other kinds of support do volunteers need, and are there supports that are particularly important when it becomes to intergenerational volunteering?
There's, I think, data is a very important one. Just understanding the dynamics. I mentioned that the City of Ottawa has about a million people, over a million people in it. There's a lot of variety throughout the community. And older people are not a homogeneous group. There's a lot of differences in terms of language and cultural background and ability to participate in activities. So I think that data piece really becomes the basis. We spend a lot of time thinking about inclusion and making volunteering not just accessible to people, but truly inviting to people. And I think that that's another area where some of the kind of deep research and policy thinking about equity, diversity, inclusion, and how to introduce that into the organizations that are hosting volunteers is something that small organizations can't do on their own. There's a lot of things related to the police checks and reference checks and the screening process for volunteering that are really sort of system-wide and need to be developed, platforms established that can make that whole process easier, to make the whole onboarding process for a volunteer less threatening for many people who maybe haven't been through something like that before, but also smoother, more efficient, and lower cost for the volunteering organizations.
Thank you, Mr. Van Bynen. Madame Chabot, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
6 minutes, please, Ms. Chabot.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. To witnesses, I would like to extend special greetings to Ms. Campbell. Thank you, Ms. Campbell, for accepting our invitation. I tell my colleagues that within my constituency, Le Petit Peuple has a unique mission, and the objective of this study here is volunteering, not only volunteering in general, but intergenerational volunteering. And Le Petit Peuple is a concrete example of an organization where this objective is at play. Ms. Campbell, I would like to thank you. You already started giving some answers regarding ways of promoting this exercise. Well, maybe it's not really an exercise. I'm talking about promoting intergenerational volunteerism. You talked about funding, permanent funding. You talked about what is happening in Quebec, and rightfully so. And I understand that there are specific difficulties when we are dealing with intergenerational volunteerism. It's difficult when it comes to specific requests. Could you please tell us more about that? Yes, thank you, Ms. Chabot. Yes, very often what happens is we do the best we can to survive as a small organization. It's complex because we have two different clients. We don't respect many of the criteria that we have to respect to receive dedicated funding. We have Nouveau Horizon and Québec, des Amis, And sometimes these are grants that are limited in time. I think we do need a dedicated source of funding. I think this is a fascinating solution both for young people and for seniors in the society. Question: so concretely, if there were programs that existed to deal specifically with intergenerational volunteerism, this would help you. You will not be wondering about asking for grants in one program or from another program because the missions are not always clear. Because with programs like Nouveaux Horizons, they have a specific criteria which do not necessarily meet the requirements for young people. So that's a good idea you've raised. When you apply for programs, is it difficult, technically or administratively? Has the situation changed? Answer: it is very, very laborious. I've been in Le Petit Peuple for about 10 years now. I have been executive director only for a year. And I have sent out a dozen applications, and it's very laborious. Every application is unique. They are long applications. We always have to repeat them. We have to do new applications for new projects. But this is a formula that works. So we would like this to go on for a long time. And that is why we require human resources as well. Unfortunately, this is time that we could invest elsewhere. I have other questions, Mr. Chair, if I have enough time. The study is just starting. And we had a witness who talked about the crisis of volunteerism. Personally, I thought that was a very strong term, but maybe that's true because we are talking a lot about the housing crisis, public financing crisis, economic crisis. We are hearing the word crisis a lot. Have you observed that there's been a drop in the desire for volunteerism amongst the young people? Do you think that there's been a decline in volunteering, even though it has always been difficult in the past? But do you think it's still easy for you to recruit volunteers? Answer: yes, of course. There has been a significant drop amongst the young people, among families, and among seniors. I think the economic situation is responsible for this situation. For those from 13 years to 17 years, we've seen that these are the young people who don't have time to come and volunteer. Thank you.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Ms. Campo.
Please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the witnesses for being here. And this study is about intergenerational volunteering, so I am interested when I hear these unique aspects that differentiate between intergenerational volunteering and volunteering in general. So my question, I'm going to ask both witnesses, and maybe I can start with Madame Troutman-Mansdorf and then go on to Madame Campo. But in regards to infrastructure needed and value to the volunteers, how does intergenerational volunteering differ from what you would consider regular volunteering?
It's an interesting question, and it's one that I've reflected on even just in preparing for this, because I don't think about intergenerational volunteering as being something, very distinct. There are many collisions and meetings that happen around volunteering, and they all need to be carefully sort of curated and attended to in order to make sure that people have what they need in order to come together successfully. I think volunteer management itself, and I'm not in the business of volunteer management. We recruit volunteers and then put them at the disposal of the organizations we serve. But the profession of volunteer management would be where that those intergenerational challenges and the opportunities, the example that we've heard from Madame Campeau today are just really inspiring. But developing those programs, thinking about what is going to make them work, what is appropriate to the specific context, is very much the work of the organizations where volunteers are working. And volunteer managers are people that it's like a very specialized, unique kind of human resources management. Except you're working to fill 40 hours of work, you've probably got a couple of hundred people who are coming in to do a couple of hours every second week rather than a full shift. They're not getting a paycheck, so you have to think very carefully about what are their motivations, what kind of rewards and recognition do they want, what's going to keep them coming back. Training is always a big thing, and that's something that I think is very specific to the intergenerational volunteering around the use of technology, around communications. One of the challenges that we're trying to address is the need for more diversity around board tables in charities and nonprofits, and that includes youth and the experience that older people bring to a board table, but many other dimensions of diversity as well, in order to make sure that right at the top of the organization, in terms of direction setting and strategy and priorities, that those boards are really equipped to set the direction for the organizations in an appropriate way during a time when everything is changing. And I think youth participation in boards, where we think of those as being something maybe more for older people, is a particular challenge to make sure that youth are really welcome at those tables, that they get the support and the mentorship that they need, and that their voices are really heard.
Thank you so much. And Madame Campeau, I wonder if you could just share some of the differentiation factors in perhaps infrastructure and value to volunteers. I know you raised one, which was the funding mechanism. If you could just share if there's others.
Oui.
Yes. When you talk about infrastructure, it takes the right types of buildings, access ramps. We also have people with reduced mobility who come, so we need our spaces to be accessible. Another difficulty that we encounter is the time slots available. When the two groups meet, we want to make sure sometimes the people don't have the same time availability. Sometimes young people want to come during the day. We also need to take into account staff that are dealing with two different realities. Even in terms of activities, we are dealing with two categories of people who have very different needs in terms of volunteerism. So we need to factor in all that. So that's what I see. When we talk about intergenerational volunteerism, it's still volunteerism. So it's very difficult to compare it with the ordinary volunteerism. The lady before me talked about consultation tables. At our level, we sit on the table for young people and the table for seniors. So it would be a good idea to have a single table to deal with those separate realities.
That's great. Thank you very much. And just on that, just talking about tables, Madame Campeau, you talked about community kitchens, you talked about food. I think there was mention about transportation. These are two topics that have come up in the past, which is the bus passes, the transportation piece, and also this idea of sharing food together. And I just wonder, Madame Campeau, if you can just talk about how the federal government could maybe assist in those factors that are enticing people to come together but are needed to bring people together.
Juste être sûr de bien comprendre votre question.
I'm trying to understand your question. You are asking, could you please repeat? I'm sorry. Could you please repeat your question?
Federal level, thinking about how can we help to entice intergenerational volunteerism, to expand not just volunteerism in Canada, but the value to the volunteers. I think we're trying to build connection, relationships, community sometimes. So the two factors that seem to come back are this need for transportation, whether that's bus passes, some access to bus passes, and the other one that comes is around food. And you mentioned community kitchens, but you also mentioned that sharing food skills, preparation of food skills. So I'm just wondering if there is a place here for the federal government to assist through those two channels, food and transportation, to make intergenerational volunteering a success. Big question, yes.
Answer, Ms. Kempo.
Oui, mais tout part.
Yes. It all depends on the grants we receive. For example, talking about transportation, we have bought a van, but the number of seats are limited. I don't think I have a wide pool of volunteers like the other witness. But I think that with the housing crisis, the food banks are overwhelmed. People are thinking about feeding themselves and being lodged before they think about volunteerism. So we have free services, so we don't ask for payment for our services. All our services are free for seniors. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, Ms. Campo.
Mr. Aitchison for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to focus on something that Ms. Troutmansdorf said, and you referenced something that a previous witness from Kelowna around the food bank mentioned, and I've heard it many times as well, not just in the volunteer sector, but in all kinds of sectors, and that's painfully long applications for funding programs, whether it's we talk a lot about the CMHC around here as an example. I was looking at your organization's annual report, and there's a number of different organizations listed there. Employment Ontario, Ottawa Community Foundation, United Way, Canada Summer Jobs, Trillium Foundation, City of Ottawa. I'm assuming long, painful application process for each of those, and maybe even with some of the corporate sponsors, there's probably an application process as well. This is one of those areas where I recognize that government does play a role in assisting community organizations, and that's not a bad thing. But I am still a conservative, and I'm always looking for ways to do things better, more efficiently, more effectively. We can do more with less, for example. I know that you worked in this place at one time, so you understand a little bit how it works. Have you any thoughts on what you might do differently, if there could be perhaps how you could structure a system where there was fewer applications, trusted organizations, whatever it might be? Can you give me some thoughts on that?
Thank you very much for that question. It's a really important and fundamental question. I think the charitable and nonprofit sector in Canada should be seen and perceived as partners to government. We're helping to deliver services and programs to fill gaps, to respond to local needs that only someone who's really based in that community and has the networks to bring together the resources in that community to address a need that a government, and especially a federal government, could never tackle. But trust is a really important word. I think that the big issues are multi-year funding. Every grant I have, except for one, is a 1 year or less in grant. So your timing horizon, your planning horizon is always short term. There's no such thing as a permanent job. Every year starts with 0 in the budget, and you have to build it up over the course of the year, and that uncertainty just takes a toll. The time on the grants is brutal. Madame Campeau made reference to the filling out the form. The amount of money involved and the amount of time involved, there's no relation between. If anything, they're in inverse order to one another. And the other thing is the difference between the time that you hear about the possibility of having that money and sort of start planning what you could do with it, the time you put in the application, the time you hear back that you've been successful, and the time that the money actually lands and that you're able to start, that can be a year in times. And that's not a planning horizon that a really small organization like mine can work on. It just doesn't bring out the best in any of the organizations that those funding sources support.
So I wonder if you can elaborate a little bit on some of the work that you're. So I'm not familiar with Volunteer Ottawa, right? I'm from a smaller community, and we certainly did have programs periodically that would help train volunteers. It was oftentimes, the local chamber of commerce that would initiate something like that, for example, and it was a kind of a one-off type of program that they did. I'm assuming that your organization, as I look through here, there's members. Is there a membership fee to being a member, and so that you generate revenue that way as well? I take it.
That's right.
C'est exact. Lorsque nous parlons de membres, la plupart du temps, nous parlons de nos membres organisationnels. Il y a environ 1400 organismes caritatifs à Ottawa, dont 300 qui accèdent directement à nos services. Beaucoup font appel à nous indirectement aussi, mais payent des frais d'adhésion pour pouvoir accéder à notre plateforme de jumelage, nos programmes éducatifs, etc., les événements que nous organisons, etc.
Yeah, it's French is coming on the English. Continue.
Thank you very much. So a lot of the training that we're providing, I mentioned earlier about the staffing challenges, the recruitment challenges in the entire not-for-profit sector, not just in volunteer centers.
Point d'ordre, il n'y a pas de traduction, Monsieur le Président.
Oh, c'est dommage.
It's not your problem.
They cleared.
Bien, vous me parlez français, oui, je comprends.
I do understand, yeah.
Madame. Oui. Commencez.
Training for nonprofit staff is a big part of what we do. Obviously, volunteer management and training people who are very new to that, very, very new in their careers, very new to the work in charities and very new to volunteer management. That's a big part of what we're doing. But we go more broadly than that. We're offering training in governance, how decision-making processes work in not-for-profit organizations. Strategic planning is something that's very, very important. Communications, how to use Canva. There's a lot of different angles, and there's not a lot of sources for really inexpensive training workshops that are very focused on what's happening in Ottawa and what's happening in the not-for-profit sector. So it's a peer learning, networking opportunity in addition to training. And all of our trainers, our facilitators are volunteers themselves, which is an enormous boost to our ability to deliver.
Mr. Fregus-Kettos for 5.
Thank you, Chair. Before I ask questions of our witness, to Ms. Gray's point, no problem. And this is just looking at the minutes that have been found, and thank you to the clerk and staff for finding that. Thank you, Vanessa, for finding that. Just looking at what was committed, the question was to provide minutes from CMHC board meetings from 2016 through to 2022. So I don't have any information on this, but my belief is that it's taken such a long time, probably because there's a lot of documents and a lot of translation to happen. That's just a guess, but I suppose we'll find out. We should see these documents. It was a commitment that was made, so we're in favor of that. To our witness, thank you very much for being here today. The question that I have picks up on a comment that you made, I think, in relation to one of the questions asked by Mr. Van Bynen. And this committee heard just a few days ago about how cumbersome it can be in this country when individuals wish to volunteer but are sent for multiple police checks. They might want to volunteer, let's say, with coaching hockey, and then you might want to volunteer for another organization, a food bank, whatever it might be, and another police check has to be taken up. You can see how cumbersome this can prove, and it stands as, I think, an impediment to volunteering in a very genuine sense. The example given by that witness was Australia, where there is one kind of, you go get a police check once, and it applies to every organization that you wish to volunteer to. It would be seen as valid, is what I'm trying to say. Are you aware of that system in Australia? Because we didn't have enough time to really explore it in detail in that meeting. I just wonder if you could offer any comments on that.
I heard about it when I listened to the testimony from Monday, but I'm not familiar myself. But I can confirm that that is a real barrier or a choke point for the volunteers, for the organizations. There's a number of different dimensions to that. It's a risk management process for the organizations in terms of making sure that the people that they are engaging as volunteers can interact with vulnerable people that they work with. But sometimes it tends to get overused, and that can slow down process as well. The idea of having a common platform and a single sort of blue ribbon, blue chip pass card is very attractive. It's a good case for a national strategy, or even just at a provincial level, because none of us individually could undertake that kind of initiative to put that infrastructure in place. I think the other thing that there are other barriers to police record checks, particularly for newcomers who don't have police records in Canada. And I think we have to think carefully about where we need them, why we need them, what kind of checks are appropriate, in order that not become a barrier to people becoming not only volunteers, but to engaging in society and building relationships in their community more quickly.
Thank you very much. You've shared a number of very important things with us today. One thing that I always like to ask witnesses, because they bring so many valuable ideas to the table, are what are one or two key points that you would want our committee to really keep in mind? Of all the things that you've said, what would be, in your view, the most important for our committee to really consider in terms of providing recommendations to government on this issue?
I know it's kind of a witness's most popular answer, but funding. Funding. We are partners to making society work. We weave social fabric, and that's not just volunteer centres. It's all the charities and nonprofits that work in your communities, and the mechanisms that are in place right now are just crippling in terms of us doing our best work, having the biggest impact. Even they prevent us in many cases from collaborating with one another effectively. Grant mechanisms are usually set up for one applicant, one funder, one project, one organization. And so I work very closely with my colleagues in other volunteer centres in Ontario. We have all kinds of good ideas for things that we could do together, develop one toolkit and then deploy it locally. We see the same needs, but there aren't mechanisms in place for us to do that easily and to put our best effort forward collectively.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Fragascatos. Before we move, I just want to advise the committee it's my intentions to adjourn at 6:54, which is 2 hours after we began. And I've decided to advise the next two witnesses will not get to them. We'll have to reschedule because it would be unfair given the timeline and members have to leave. So with that, we will go to Madame Chabot. Madame Chabot, pour 2 minutes et demi.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I have an observation, with all due respect for my colleague. When we talk about a criminal check in Quebec, for volunteers, we have a background check system, and it's more positive than negative when you look in the various sectors where volunteers can work. So I just want to say that I think it's a matter that concerns our respective jurisdictions and should not be trivialized, even though that's not what my colleague did, but I find that important to mention. Ms. Campo, there are two federal programs that exist. Let me check my notes. There's one, Service Jeunesse Canada, that promotes civic education amongst young people, including volunteerism, and Nouveau Horizon, which you mentioned, that targets seniors. In your opinion, considering that there are two clients that you deal with, and to continue the conversation with you, do you have an intergenerational segment? If there were an intergenerational segment in these programs, will it be easier for you? Inaudible for the interpreter. Yes. I do not know the first program that you mentioned. It's Service Jeunesse Canada. For some years now, we've been working with Employment Canada, which helps us out during the summer. Yes, I think that there is an intergenerational category that is missing. We need that because our activities are all based on that. Even our home-based services for young people are done free of charge by young people. Our home visits are done by the young people. So the intergenerational segment is at the heart of all our activities. Yes, particularly long-term permanent financing or funding. This would avoid us having to come up with new projects every year. Thank you. Considering your efforts to recruit, what would you say is the main advantage to promote? What would be the main asset to promote volunteerism? What would be the recipe that you would advocate? It's a challenge every year. We look into that every year. We also attend training sessions dedicated to intergenerational volunteerism. The groups are very different. We have developed partnerships over the years with secondary schools, and this facilitates everything when teachers are there to help promote the activities amongst the young people. And this also facilitates recruitment. For seniors, it's more difficult. Sometimes they go in through services and then they themselves become active volunteers. So this is the formula that has worked best over the years, is from hearing the information shared by other people that they are able to get to it. Thank you very much, Ms. Chabot.
So, to our witnesses, we're working on a study right now, and after all the testimony, our analysts will put together a report for us. And I think one of the things that will need to be clarified on the onset is what is the definition of intergenerational volunteering. I think most of us are thinking of it in youth and seniors together. So I wonder if each of the witnesses, and maybe we can start with Madame Campo this time, could just let us know their definition or how they would like to see the definition of intergenerational volunteering be laid out in this report. And if it is related to youth and seniors, what are those two age groups?
Oui, pour nous, si on parle.
If we are talking in terms of age groups, we don't have any restrictions. We have very young people who come. We even receive families in our organization. For seniors, it's those 65 years and older. We don't carry out any verification. Anyone who considers themselves a senior could take part in our services. By definition of intergenerational volunteerism is reaching out to two different groups that belong to different age groups that could reap benefits, mutual benefits, having shared benefits by putting those two groups together. Well, that was a good question. It's a broad one. It's a lot more complicated than saying we take a young person who's 14 years old and put them in a room with someone who's 85 and then we let them do whatever they want. We need to establish a relationship of trust, and that relationship is very important because in our society, we tend to forget seniors, but they have a lot of wisdom. The same goes for young people who have a lot to share and provide to the society. So there's a sharing of knowledge that takes place. Very often, the seniors are very surprised to see how active and dedicated the young people are. And now they say that the young people are doing a lot of good work. They want to get involved in society and they want to change things. So it's all about working together and providing mutual benefits for one another.
Troutmansdorf, if you would answer the same.
It's a difficult question to answer, but I had a little bit more time than Madame Campeau to think about the answer. You know, for me, I think it comes down to just breaking down silos. It's community building. It's breaking down the silos that youth. We all live in various parts of our lives or different stages of our lives where we're going to school, where we're living a career life, where we're older and we're in a long-term care home or in a senior's residence. And those silos, I don't think, are natural. I don't think those are the way that we live naturally as human beings. We're much more, there's a lot more natural interaction that should happen. And so intergenerational volunteering is really finding ways to break down those silos, bring people together to work together to accomplish something that is as simple and as complicated as building community.
Thank you, Madame Zerillo. That will conclude the first witnesses, and we are now proceeding to the second group of witnesses. They have already been advised and will be rescheduled in the new year with some other rescheduling we had to do. Let's see, where was that? Right. So again, thank you, Madame.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Point of order. I thought that we were going until 6:50.
Well, if somebody objects, we can. It's a few more minutes with that. I just want to thank the witnesses, Ms. Campeau, Madame Campeau, merci, and Madame Troutmansdorf. Thank you for your testimony before the committee. We will reschedule the others in the new year. At this time, there's two minor things before we adjourn, is the ministers will be appearing on Monday. We're finalizing that into next week's meeting. And I just want to, again, clarify the request of CMHC. So you.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Can I just ask for clarification? Which ministers are you referring to?
We're finalizing between Minister Bozano, Minister Kara, and Minister Suds and Fraser.
Bozano, Fraser.
Kara and Suds, but when we have the final confirmations, we'll send the notice to the committee members. We're working those, yes. So with that, just so, Ms. Gray, so the request you had to the clerk again on CMHC, just could we be clear on that?
Yes,
Yes.
I believe that.
Yep, no
Peter had-
disagreement, but
Okay,
just
yeah.
your follow-up.
Okay,
We're
great.
clear.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, committee members, merci beaucoup. Bonsoir.
Thank you very much. Good evening.